Hi there, I'm Avery, and 2 years of my life disappeared behind cold prison walls, all because my mom begged me to take the blame for something I didn't do. I thought loyalty would mean something when I came home, but instead, I found a family who had already replaced me, sold my memories, and shut the door in my face. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to realize they were the ones quietly erasing you? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. I sat there, alone in my tiny studio apartment, the hum of the fridge louder than it had any right to be. A letter lay untouched on the chipped kitchen table, its official seal glaring up at me. Confirmation of my release, a freedom that didn't feel much like freedom at all. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't opened much of anything lately. The mirrors stayed covered. The memories stayed buried. A sudden knock from a neighbor jolted me, sending the coffee in my cup sloshing over the rim. And just like that, I was no longer in my apartment. I was back in my mother's kitchen, a place that used to smell like cinnamon and soap, but now smelled like panic and betrayal. Celeste had been crying. Darla stood stiff in the corner, arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes avoiding mine. Clint sat silent at the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. "Please," Celeste whispered, reaching for my hand. "For the family. We can't let this ruin everything." I opened my mouth to say no, but the words didn't come out. Darla didn't speak, Clint didn't move. I was already outnumbered. Celeste promised everything would be fine. She said once it blew over, they'd make sure I had a fresh start. Russell, my father, said little, just patted my shoulder with a hand that felt more like a shove. "You'll make us proud," he muttered. I was too tired to argue, too desperate to believe them. I signed the confession that night. No lawyer, no advocate, just family. The first winter inside was worse than anything I had imagined. The cold was a living thing, sneaking into every seam of the thin jumpsuit they gave me. I wrote letters, 5 of them, to Celeste, to Darla, to anyone who might still remember I existed. No replies. The 6th letter I folded into a tiny, shaky bird and lit it on fire with a stolen cigarette. I watched the ashes scatter across the dirty floor of my cell and told myself to forget. When the gates clanged open 2 years later, I had nothing but a plastic bag with a few personal items and a bus pass. The street back to the house felt longer than it used to. The mailbox was still crooked, the porch light still flickering like a tired heartbeat. My key didn't fit the lock anymore. A neighbor from 2 houses down shuffled out with her trash and caught sight of me. "They sold it all," she said, glancing nervously at the ground. "Had a big sale. Your things went first." I stood there, numb. Somewhere in a dusty garage a few miles away, my childhood was being picked through for spare change. I knocked anyway. Habit, maybe. Or hope. Celeste opened the door wearing a crisp blouse, her lipstick too bright for a casual afternoon. "You're early," she said, as if I'd interrupted something important. From behind her, Darla's voice rang out, false and high-pitched. "Well, look who's back." Clint stayed glued to the couch, his gaze glued to a muted TV screen. "You can stay in the guest room, just for now," Celeste said, already turning away. The house smelled different. New paint, new carpet. It smelled like I didn't belong. I followed her down the hall like a ghost chasing its own past. The room that had once been mine was now a workout space, a sleek Peloton bike gleaming in the corner where my bed used to be. Celeste handed me a folded towel, all business. "You can freshen up," she said. I opened the closet, heart hammering against my ribs. It was empty. Not even a hanger, not even a forgotten shoelace. That's when I knew. I hadn't just gone to prison, I had been erased. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, the ceiling above me unfamiliar too. The room smelled faintly of new carpet and lemon cleaner, like someone had tried too hard to erase what came before. My body ached for a bed that didn't exist anymore. I turned my head toward the dresser. Empty. Every drawer slid open too easily, revealing nothing but dust and silence. I pushed off the thin blanket and padded to the wall where my old poster once hung, the one of the constellations I used to memorize at night. All that remained was a faint discoloration on the paint, a ghost outline of dreams someone had decided no longer mattered. I touched the spot gently, as if it might hum back with a memory. It didn't. The silence screamed louder than any insult ever could. The next morning, I wandered into the hallway still barefoot, trying to anchor myself. Sunlight slanted across a gallery wall newly installed. Darla's high school graduation. Darla's wedding, beaming in white. Darla holding Chloe like a trophy. Frame after frame of her life displayed proudly. There was no sign I had ever lived here. No baby photo with a crooked smile. No awkward middle school dance snapshot. I stood there studying the wall like it was a museum exhibit I didn't belong to. Celeste breezed past me, carrying a laundry basket. She didn't look up as she said, "Had to tidy up a bit. The clutter was too much." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something inside me folded, sharp and silent. Later that day, Chloe's voice floated down the hallway. She was whispering, but the walls carried every word. "Who's she?" Chloe asked. There was a pause. Then Darla's voice, smooth and indifferent. "Just someone staying for a little while." I stayed rooted to the spot, letting the words wrap around my ankles like vines. That evening over dinner, Russell chewed his steak noisily, not bothering to meet my eyes. "You know," he said, waving his fork lazily, "your mother lost a lot of clients the month you were convicted." I swallowed my tea too fast, feeling it burn all the way down. I smiled the way you do when someone steps on your foot and doesn't apologize. Tight, controlled, polite. After dinner, I was handed a towel and a stack of plates without a word. I washed, rinsed, and dried, the mechanical motions keeping my hands busy while my mind spun. Celeste didn't thank me. Darla walked by and muttered, "Stack the plates better next time. They're going to tip over." Clint didn't even glance at me, too busy scrolling through his phone. The air in the house felt thinner now, like it didn't have room for me to breathe. That night, I found myself pacing in front of the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked back at me, worn and ghostly under the buzzing fluorescent light. "Maybe they're just stressed," I whispered. "Maybe it's my fault for coming back unannounced." I leaned closer, searching the face in the mirror for something familiar, something worth saving. "Who are you now?" I asked softly, but the mirror stayed silent. Later, when the house had gone still except for the hum of the fridge and Clint's occasional cough, I tiptoed up the creaky attic stairs. Dust danced in the weak beam of my flashlight. In the far corner, buried under a faded tarp, I found it. A battered cardboard box with a piece of duct tape scrawled with a single letter, A. I pulled it open. Inside was a ripped yearbook with half the signatures scratched out, a hospital wristband from the day I broke my arm at 8 years old, and a copy of my prison discharge papers folded neatly in a clear plastic sleeve. Tucked under the papers was a sticky note. It read, "Just in case." I sat there in the dark, the box cradled in my lap, realizing Celeste hadn't kept these things because she missed me. She kept them because she thought she might need them someday. The grocery store wasn't where I expected the next punch to land. I was reaching for a box of cereal when I heard my name, soft, hesitant. Turning, I found myself face to face with an old classmate. Her smile was tight, the kind people wear when they're about to say something they shouldn't. She cleared her throat, shifted her shopping basket. "I heard what really happened," she said, voice low. I tilted my head slightly, masking the immediate spike of adrenaline. "Oh?" I prompted, keeping my tone light. She leaned in, almost conspiratorially. "You know, about the crash. They said you'd been out drinking, lost control. Such a shame." I managed a laugh, thin and brittle. "Yeah, such a shame." Inside, I was unraveling, each word scraping another layer raw. I drove home without even remembering the turns I took. In the kitchen, I dropped the grocery bag onto the counter with a hollow thud and found Celeste stirring a pot of something on the stove. "Why are people saying I partied and crashed?" I asked, steady. She didn't even blink. "You didn't exactly fight it, did you?" She shrugged, a small, careless gesture. "We had to protect Darla's future." No apology, no flicker of guilt, just moral detachment as natural as breathing. I nodded because arguing felt pointless. I walked out of the kitchen, my feet cold against the tile, and closed myself in the guest room that still didn't feel like mine. Later that week, the mail came in a sad, soggy pile by the front door. Among the bills and coupons was a thick envelope from a credit agency. Curiosity prickled against dread. I opened it, and felt my stomach drop. A massive loan had been taken out in my name. Confused and trembling, I drove to the bank, clutching the notice like it might burn through my fingers. The clerk, a woman with kind eyes, tapped her keyboard and frowned. "It was signed by Celeste Vaughn," she said gently, flipping the screen to show me the scanned form. She added herself as secondary authorization. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. "You should be careful who you trust," the clerk added softly. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek so hard it tasted like pennies. That night, I didn't bother with dinner. I pulled into a fast food drive-thru but couldn't bring myself to order anything. Instead, I sat there, engine idling, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. "This isn't about forgiveness," I whispered. "It's about survival." It was the first honest thing I had said to myself in years. Back home, I couldn't sleep. I ended up in the garage, digging through boxes, looking for anything that could anchor me back to who I had been before they rewrote my story. In a battered box shoved under a moldy tarp, I found an envelope, Darla's handwriting. Inside was a receipt from a furniture store, dated 3 months before my release. A luxury couch, financed under my name and social security number. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, the paper trembling in my hands. They hadn't been waiting for me to come back. They had been cashing me in. The bank papers felt heavy in my hands as I walked into the kitchen. Celeste was at the sink, casually drying a plate, like nothing in the world had shifted. I placed the documents on the counter between us. "You sign this," I said, my voice barely louder than the hum of the refrigerator. She glanced down, barely sparing the papers a second look. "It was for your own good. You wouldn't understand." Her tone was flat, as if explaining the weather. I waited for a crack, a sign of regret or shame. There was none, just the sound of the faucet dripping slowly into the steel sink. A flicker of rage lit somewhere deep inside me, but I tamped it down, like I always did. Part of me still wanted to believe there was some logic, some love tangled up in their betrayal. Later that afternoon, Celeste and Russell called a family meeting. I sat at the end of the dining table, the sun streaming harshly through the windows, casting long, accusing shadows. A neat stack of papers sat in the center. "We're updating the will," Celeste said lightly, tapping the documents as if discussing a grocery list. "For everyone's protection." I skimmed the first page, legal jargon twisted into sharp hooks. My name was there once, scratched out neatly. The new beneficiary line read, "Darla Boone." Darla smiled, her hand sliding across the table to pat mine. "We'll work something out later," she cooed. Clint leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. The pen they handed me felt too heavy, like it might shatter the bones in my fingers. "Family always figures it out," Darla whispered. I didn't want to sign. I wanted to flip the table, to scream until the window shattered. Instead, I pressed the pen to the page and watched my name bleed away, stroke by careful stroke. As soon as the ink dried, Celeste whisked the papers off the table, disappearing into the hallway. No thank you, no smile. Just the sound of a lock turning on a drawer somewhere behind the walls. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay staring at the ceiling, tracing the tiny cracks spreading like veins across the plaster. I replayed the meeting, each moment scraping rawer than the last. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for doubting them. I felt awake. Before the sun rose, I found myself wandering into the kitchen. The house was silent, save for the old clock ticking above the fridge. The drawer with the will wasn't fully closed. My fingers hesitated only a moment before pulling it open. There, tucked neatly beside the legal forms I had signed, was another packet of papers, bold black letters across the top, Darla, primary inheritance beneficiary. I touched the file, heart pounding, the edges of the pages cutting cold into my skin. I hadn't just signed away the house. I had signed away my place in their world. We sat around the dining table like actors trapped in a play that none of us wanted to perform anymore. Darla beamed across the table, her teeth too white against the strained edges of her lips. "The money will come later, trust us," she said, tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the polished wood. Celeste nodded along, her voice breezy. "For accounting purposes, just need to finalize a few things." I nodded too. What else could I do? Days turned into weeks. The money never came. The conversations dried up. Eventually, no one even pretended to acknowledge the promise they had made. It wasn't a delay, it was a deletion. I realized then that later was just another lie they dressed up in politeness. One evening, Darla stormed into the guest room without knocking, Clint trailing behind her like a bad smell. Her face was flushed, eyes wild. "There's cash missing from the living room drawer," she snapped. Clint leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me. "You're the only new factor here," he said, with fake sympathy dripping from every word. I stared at them both, then stood slowly, the chair legs scraping against the floor. "If you think I stole it," I said calmly, "call the police." Silence. Neither moved. Darla's mouth opened, then closed. Clint shifted his weight, uncomfortable for the first time. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Or drop it." They dropped it. But the air between us changed forever. Later that night, I found Clint alone outside, lighting a cigarette by the fence. I walked up and planted myself in front of him. "Accuse me again," I said, my voice low and even, "and I will not just leave. I will expose everything, the crash, the lies, the loans." He exhaled smoke into the night air, smirking like he still thought he had the upper hand. But he said nothing, and that silence told me everything. I packed my bag quietly, like slipping out of a bad dream. No slamming doors, no dramatic speeches, just the soft, final zip of the suitcase. I didn't leave a note. There wasn't anything left to say. The highway stretched ahead of me, endless and empty. For the first time in a long time, the unknown felt lighter than the life I was leaving behind. At a payphone just off the interstate, I dialed Celeste's number. She picked up on the second ring. "You have until sunrise to fix what you owe me," I said, voice steady, heart pounding. "If not, I'm done, completely." I hung up before she could answer, standing there, under the flickering yellow light, the night wrapping around me like armor. I breathed deep. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my survival. The call came just after noon, while I was balancing a cup of reheated coffee on my knee and answering emails from a foldable chair. "Is this Avery Rhodes?" a clipped voice asked. I answered cautiously. "This is Mark from Westfield Renovations. We were considering hiring you, but we found some concerning things online." The words tangled in my throat. I forced them out. "What kind of things?" There was a pause. Then, almost apologetically, he said, "A post, anonymous, accusations about stealing from previous employers." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there, staring at the cracked tile on the floor. I found the post easily. It wasn't detailed, just poisonous enough. The language was too familiar. Tiny phrases only someone from inside that house would know. Little things I had said once, thrown back at me like knives. Clint. My chest tightened, but my jaw locked harder. Later that night, scrolling Instagram while my dinner sat untouched, I saw it. Chloe's birthday party. The matching family outfits, the perfect smiles. Celeste beaming between Darla and Russell, like a queen with her loyal subjects. I wasn't tagged, not even mentioned. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. That night a text buzzed on my phone. "Hope you're well. Darla, casual as ever." I stared at it until the screen dimmed and the message faded into black. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began planting my own seeds. A review, anonymous, detailing Clint's shady business practices, written with the precision only someone who knew the truth could manage. I reached out privately to 3 clients I knew were considering contracts with him, attaching evidence of my clean record. I didn't lash out. I moved methodically, like setting a chessboard for a game I didn't intend to lose again. In the quiet after, I pulled out the journal I'd bought impulsively at a gas station. The first page stayed empty for a long while. Then carefully I wrote, "I am not their scapegoat anymore." And somehow, breathing came a little easier that night. At the end of the week, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a glossy photo. Chloe with a balloon, wearing a bright pink t-shirt that read, "Best family ever." On the back, Celeste's looping script, "You should have been there." I pinned the photo to the fridge, stared at it for a long moment. Then I peeled it off, walked outside, and dropped it into the fire pit. Flames curled the edges until the words and faces disappeared into ash. The invitation wasn't meant for me. I knew that the moment it slid under my door, creased and sloppy, my name scribbled as an afterthought. Someone had forgotten to scrub me from the list, and for one fleeting moment, I thought maybe this was an olive branch. I put on my best dress anyway, the one I used to wear to interviews before everything fell apart. I even fixed my hair, as if pretending would make it real. At the event, I didn't even make it past the entrance. Celeste intercepted me, hands folded primly at her waist, her expression pinched with something like pity, or maybe embarrassment. "It's a closed family affair," she said, voice syrupy and sharp. "You understand? The image." For a beat, I couldn't move. Then I smiled softly, the kind of smile that no longer needed an audience. I nodded. I walked away before the tears could spill, but not before every head at the party turned to watch. A week later, there was a knock at my door. Celeste stood there, holding a plastic-wrapped tray of store-bought cookies. Her lipstick was too bright, her smile too tight. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't say yes, but I didn't slam the door either. I let her in. She sat at my tiny kitchen table like she owned it, launching into a speech about Russell's failing health, about Darla's latest business venture crumbling, about medical bills piling up. She ended with a neat bow. "You need help, and this is a chance to be part of the family again." I sat across from her, arms folded tightly, feeling the weight of every lie, every betrayal. "Was I ever not part of it?" I asked, voice low. Celeste's mouth tightened. She tried to speak, but I leaned forward first. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I listed it all. Each credit card fraud, each stolen memory, each time they chose convenience over me. When she opened her mouth to interrupt, I lifted my hand. "You came to collect from a grave you dug yourselves." For the first time, Celeste had no response. I rose and walked to the drawer where I kept the folder, the one holding every receipt, every signature, every piece of proof they thought I was too stupid to keep. I placed it gently between us. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's clarity." Celeste stood up slowly, brushing invisible lint from her slacks. She didn't take the folder. She didn't look at me. The door clicked softly behind her as she left. The next morning I found a plain white envelope tucked under the mat. Inside was a hospital bill, itemized and cold, and a sticky note in Darla's handwriting, scrawled in a rushed slant. "Be better than them." I placed the envelope into the drawer beside the folder, unopened. The envelope was thin, almost weightless in my hand. I hadn't checked my old P.O. box in months, but something had nudged me there today. A gut feeling I couldn't shake. Inside was a bank statement, not addressed to me but to Darla, mistakenly rerouted. The numbers stared up at me in cold, unfeeling print. A deposit. A large one, the exact amount I had given Celeste for Russell's supposed medical bills. Stapled to the statement was a colorful, glossy business plan titled Darla's Real Estate Rebrand. I sat down on the curb outside the post office and laughed. Not bitter, not broken, just done. No tears, no rage, just the clean, simple realization that I had finally hit the bottom and there was nothing left to cling to. Back at my apartment, I moved through the motions without thinking, canceled the few utilities still linked to the family's address, scrubbed my name from every account, every tie, every piece of paper that connected me to them. I booked a storage unit 2 towns over, packed up what little I had, left the keys on the cracked counter without a note, no dramatic exits, just air where weight used to be. My phone lit up constantly that night. Calls, voicemails, texts, Celeste, Darla, even Russell. Each message more frantic than the last, swinging wildly between pleading and accusing. I didn't listen to a single one. Instead, I deleted them before they could finish downloading, savoring the feeling of space growing inside me. The next morning, I drove toward the edge of Bakersfield, the city fading behind me like a bad memory. I found a small lake, quiet and almost forgotten, and sat on the shore with a cheap gas station coffee and my journal. I opened to a fresh page, wrote a single sentence. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. The words bled a little from the cheap pen, but I didn't care. I reached into my bag and pulled out the last photo I had kept. Me, Celeste, and Darla, frozen in happier lies. I held it over my coffee cup lighter until the edges curled black, then dropped it into the sand and watched the wind carry the ashes. When the knock came at my motel door, I almost didn't answer. It was Chloe. She stood there, small and serious, holding a folded note in her hand. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she whispered. The note was simple, scrawled in childish handwriting. "You deserved better. I'm sorry." I hugged her, brief. No big speeches, no promises. "Thank you," I said, "but I'm not coming back." As the sun dipped low, I sat by the window, my journal on my lap, when my phone buzzed one last time. "Mom." The name pulsed on the screen like a wound reopening. I stared at it for a long time. Then I powered the phone off, placing it face down on the bedside table. The silence that used to hurt now felt like safety. I found out about the post from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who still remembered enough to send a warning. "She's talking about you, Avery," the text read, along with a screenshot. Darla's words dripped with polished venom, masked by vague phrasing. "Some people pretend to be victims when they're the villains." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't even clever. It was just cruel. I read it once. Just once. Then I deleted the app, the account, the digital fingerprint that still tied me to any of it. Neighbors whispered again. I heard my name over grocery store intercoms, saw faces turn just slightly too slow. But I didn't flinch. I didn't defend. I didn't bleed for an audience. Instead, I bought a one-way bus ticket to Oregon, somewhere quieter, somewhere with more trees than memories. The drive north felt like slowly waking from a long, fevered dream. I rented a small cottage near the coastline, white walls, uneven floors, a garden overtaken by wild mint. No one here knew my name. No one asked. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter. The dogs barked, the cats hissed, but none of them lied to me. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, where my misshapen bowls and lopsided vases were met with nothing but laughter and encouragement. I learned to reshape things broken and imperfect, including myself. One evening, sitting barefoot on the cold sand, I watched the sun dip below the jagged edge of the ocean. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, I realized. It's choosing peace over resentment. I pulled out my old journal, the one I had carried through every messy mile, and scribbled under the last line, "I am not lost. I am rediscovered." As twilight swallowed the shoreline, a stray dog wandered up, skinny and wary. I didn't move. I just patted the empty sand beside me. The dog hesitated, then inched closer, settling near my knee with a sigh that matched my own. No one had to say anything. Some wounds heal quietly. Some endings aren't fireworks. They're quiet sunrises. Sometimes healing doesn't come with a grand speech or a dramatic moment. Sometimes healing is choosing yourself, quietly, consistently, without needing anyone else to understand why. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up, who stays, who protects your peace without demanding pieces of you in return. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can endure for someone else's comfort. Choosing to walk away doesn't make you selfish. It makes you brave. What about you? Have you ever had to let go of people you once thought would never hurt you? How did you find your way back to yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments below. If this story touched something inside you, leave a 1 inch in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, I'm still grateful you gave it your time. Let me know what you would love to see next. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want more real stories that speak straight to the heart. Your support means more than you know. See you in the next chapter.